Okay, we're here. So welcome back. How's everybody's Pesach? So nice, yeah. I know it feels like a long time ago, but like it's still so real. Okay, Pesach was amazing for those of us, whoever was in Orlando. Shout out to Rachala. She's joining now on Zoom. So anybody who was there, and Paloma, huge shout out because like you have this chus of like everybody's learning there, and it was so nice. And I got to hang out with Sarah's mother-in-law a lot, and like a lot of like mommies came, and it was like very cute. It was really nice. But I really also like we're just coming off Rosh Chodesh Iyar, like it just started yesterday, and I feel like this was one of my things that I started in Adar. I started making like a little playlist. I shared it with you guys, like just about a month.
It was like my whole thing right there.
Oh, I'm so happy. I know. I'm always like, who is listening to my playlist? But like, I'm like, okay. So now Mary's listening to it. Actually, my sister-in-law, Aviva, if she's listening, I don't know. But she had a baby like 2 weeks ago. And she said like the day she had a baby, she's like, I was listening to your playlist the whole day. I was like, okay, then the baby, hi everybody. Welcome back. Hi, Leah. I know we were just talking about Orlando. I know. Leia had lots of babies there. Like they were like kids all over the place and learning, but like we like shoved them upstairs, and then someone's like, "The movie theater's on," and we're like, "Great!" Everybody go upstairs. All the kids are like going upstairs to play in a movie theater. We're like learning Tanya downstairs. I'm like, what if it cancels it out, you know? But the truth is, with the playlist, I was like, you know what? Let me be ready in time, and I'm gonna have it ready for Iyar. So I started like 3 days before, and I was like thinking about what Iyar means, and like the first thing that always pops into my head is like Ani Hashem Rofecha, right? So Ani Hashem Rofecha, and I was like, okay, so what songs are going to be about this? Like we tried for Adar, I tried Simcha, and for Pesach, I was trying Geula. So I'm like, what is Iyar? Like, what are we feeling? So then I'm like, if it's Ani Hashem Rofecha, then it has to be, something has to be connected to that. So I was like, Rofecha, I'm like, okay, what songs I know with Rofecha? And I was like, right away, I'm like, Hineni Rofelach. If anybody knows the Thank You Hashem song, Take Us Home, you know, Shamati et Tfilatecha. It was also in the last one. It was in my Nissan one also, but there's a female version of it that Mandy Portnoy, my sister-in-law, sings. Menucha, she's from South Africa, and she's like an incredible accent. It's on like the women's album, and I was just like, you know what? Like I listened to it, I was like, okay, perfect, that's the song. And then I was thinking about the words of like, you know, we're always like wearing these necklaces, we're thinking about everything in the hostages, and it was like, we were always saying, bring them home, bring them home, bring them home. And it's like so much in my face. And all of a sudden, as I was listening to the song, I was like, oh my gosh, like take us home. Like I realized it was like the collective version of bring them home is like take us home also. It's not just those people who are trapped in the tunnels, it's also like we're also stuck. So like it was like bring us home, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was feeling it so much. And then I continued like going through the words like Shamati Tfilatecha, and then it says V'sechazena inenu b'tzion v'Yushalayim v'rachamim. And like if there's one thing that we've been talking about like all Nisan is that Geula is going to happen b'rachamim. Like everything that I've been learning from Rabbi Yossi and everything that I've been trying to teach is that Geula doesn't have to be like a battle that we have to like fight on the ground. It could be that we just jump right over, like pass over. Remember, like going a river, going over. So Geula b'rachamim, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, we just had Geula and Nisan, and now we want to make sure that it's b'rachamim. And then I got like very, very emotional because I was remembering like where this song came from. And this song, it's already like 6.5 years, which it almost feels like you could tell a story. You know, like you hear these stories of like tzaddikim and like, and we don't know when this happened, whatever. But like, I'm like, listen, 6.5 years ago was like, it's a time that this happened. And it was the Thank You Hashem Shabbos, where my husband and his brothers spent time in Tzfas. And also like throughout Yerushalayim, but they were in Tzfas. And after that whole experience for Shabbos that they spent in Tzfas, that's where they like first learned the concept of like Thank You Hashem. Like somebody said something, Thank You Hashem, and then they were like flinging it around, and that Shabbos became like the Thank You Hashem Shabbos. And then on their way down to Yerushalayim, I happened to have been in Yerushalayim for Shabbos then with Nechama, and it was like, I say this a lot, but it was probably one of my hardest Shabbosim I've ever like experienced in my life. Like I was alone, I was like running this like Olami trip, and with like just like a lot of like young, incredible people, but like I had a 3-month-old baby who was like not doing well, and like I all of a sudden realized that like she wasn't eating, and like everything was happening to me at once, and like she was 5 pounds and like 3 months old, and like I'm schlepping her around by myself, and like Eli Melson's fast like bringing with his brothers, you know, like the classic moment of like what is happening here in this world. And I feel like every time you experience darkness, you know something big is going to happen. But I remember Ali Melech calling me, and he's like, Faigy, oh my gosh, we stopped at this cave, and it was like so cool, and we heard this song, oh my gosh, I'm going to play it to you. I'm like, okay, just come home, like, like I'm so happy. But just because I was like so tense. But then when he played me the song, he came down. He's like, there's this cave. It's a very famous cave. It's on the way from Tzfas to Miron. They were going to Rabbi Shimon, and it's almost Lag BaOmer. It happens to be Nechama Mavis for Lag BaOmer tonight. I was like, you know what? I'll put it on my table for show and tell for Tanya. She made a bonfire. That's her artistic bonfire. So he was like, we stopped at this cave, and it's a famous cave. It's known as like the Tzfas cave. And they like have fabrings there, like Matzah Shabbos, Thursday nights. And they went in, and there was like people like playing like drums, and it was like literally
Sharpmeter, Motzi Shabbos, like Havdalah there, and they had like a harp player.
Whoa! Of course she did.
It's very cool.
Of course she
But
did.
It's a very cool.
It's a very cool experience. Okay, so I didn't know like people make like can you book it for like a night? Is that what
I
it
don't
is?
know.
Like that is so. Leave it to Larry Sharp to like figure it out.
People that were there also, but like
Right. Okay. So maybe you could describe the scene better, but like I can send you like the recording of it. Almach recorded it. It was like they were like playing these drums, and they were singing in a very like meditative, slow like way, like Shamati, and they were like dragging each word out. Et tfilatecha. And you just hear like banging, and then you hear like some girls. There was also some women in there singing, and it's like chilling, tribal. And I was like, oh my God, this like song came from a cave. And I'm like, take them home, bring them home. I like started like just feeling all these feelings. I'm like, okay, so this is definitely the first song of ER. And like, obviously whatever's happening in the world is very much connected to who we are. And like, we want to believe, like, take them home. We want to believe, bring them home, take us home. And it like hit like in all ways. And then also because we have a female version of the song, like I always feel like that's just more Guladik. So on Nissan, we had Take Them Home with Maishi Storage. And now this, I just put it together and I'll send it out tonight. This is like the first song. So like imagine them like, we don't understand what's happening in the tunnels. Like, there's no concept for us there's no way for us to understand it, but just knowing that as Yidden, we've been in tunnels before, like, and we've been in caves, and Rabbi Shimon, like, was in a cave, right? Like, we're in the time of Sira, like, we're going to be celebrating, like, Rabbi Shimon. We have to understand that there's something very, very deep happening there. Like, a cave represents the inside, it represents Pneumius, it represents everything that we're learning here. Like, maybe, like, we can simulate that here, but understand that, like, they're not alone, we're not alone, like, we're in this together. So I'm going to try to send it out by tonight. I'm waiting for like, we made a Thank You Hashem a cappella song, and it's not on Apple Music yet. It's on Spotify, so I'll try to do it on Spotify, but send it out. And I think it's just, I know it's Sphira, and I have a heter to listen to slow music during Sphira. I don't know if it's a heter or that's just how, that's okay. Like that's what my Rav does, and I follow that. So if you're okay with listening to slow music, you'll have the playlist. So I'll send it out. Okay, so that's just the intro, and now it's been like a very long time since we were together, so I feel like even I need a recap. So we started off this like text-based Tanya by learning that every parak is Yechidus with the Rebbe, right? Okay, so we're coming in. Thank you, Chai. Come closer, I miss you. Sorry, I was like in the middle of the story. I'm like, I want to say hello, but like, hi. And hear about Yantev. So we started off by saying that the first question we asked was, what's wrong with us? And we explained that there's nothing really wrong with us. We just have two sides to us. We have the Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Bahamas. There's two sides. There are things that pull us, and it makes sense. We also explained that one comes before the other. The Nefesh Bahamas comes first, and the Nefesh Elokis comes slowly. It like integrates into us slowly. It's not something that you wake up one day and you have it. It comes in slowly to you. And as you learn how to harness its powers, you make sure that that one rules over the other one and knows how to do it. Then we spoke about just what a neshama is, and we explained that the nefesh halokis is a piece of Hashem chelek. This is text-based Tanya. We gotta know the lines, right? So chelek al kami mamish. Okay, not just mamish like a literal piece of Hashem, but also in mamash, just like in all physicality, Hashem is in all physicality. Then we said that, okay, so now we know what this soul. So what's the DNA? Like, what's a soul made up of? And we said that it's made up of 10 spheros, 10 character traits, and they can be broken up into two parts. Chachma Bina Das, right, like the Chabad, and then the bottom part, the other ones are the 7 emotional. So we have 3 intellectual, 7 emotional. We have the 3 mothers, the 7 children, right? And we said, well, we call them the doubles, or we call them the days of the week, and the 3's a little bit more related to the intellect, a little bit more related to Shabbos. And those are the ways that our body, those are the soul powers, okay? That's the word, the soul powers, okay? That's how Sheistav always says it. And then we went on to say, okay, fine. So now we know what we are, but how do we interact in this world? And we said that we need like an interface. We need something in order to get our soul to shine in this world. By the way, just an interesting metaphor, only because we were talking about cruises and icebergs. I like heard the background conversation. So like, I don't have a lot of fears, but like cruises is definitely one of them. Maybe because I was like 4 years old when I watched Titanic, and I was like, it's not okay, you know. But Rabbi Yossi always gives the example of like your neshama, right? Like chelik al kami mal mamish, like a piece of inside of you, a soul. And he gives this mashal and reminded me of the iceberg, of how like when you see an iceberg in the ocean, right? Like sometimes you don't really. You don't even see it literally until you come close. It's very, very, very small, right? It could be a teeny little thing. And then right underneath the surface, it's a tremendous rock, right? This huge thing that could actually like boats crash into, people don't see. He was explaining that mashal is that your neshama, the piece that you feel inside of you, is just the teeny type of iceberg. That's the only part that shows. But it's so much deeper. It's connected to something so much bigger under that the only part that shows out is a little teeny tiny iceberg that you're like, iceberg! Even that's like nice size, right? Because you can notice it. But underneath it's so much bigger. Then we said, so the interface on how to connect into this world, what did we say? Hashem gave us what in order to connect to this world? He gave us clothing, right? So the clothing are the mitzvos, right? It is, right. So we said that the clothing that Hashem first gave us, that klipas noga, the shiny layer that's on top of it, is something that the nefesh habahamis comes from. It comes from that world, and that means that if there's a klipa, what does it mean? Oh, I forgot to review this part. If there's a klipa, that means that you could remove it, right? Oh, there's so many parts that I mixed in the review, but like we want to go a little bit further. Like I'm now remembering all the different parts of the Nefesh HaBahamis, right? So the klipa. But the clothing is called levushim. The way that we refer to our levushim there are three ways that we can connect through our clothing. Remember we said like the paper doll mashal, that like you put them on, and they are thought, speech, and action. Look at you guys, amazing. By the way, I always re-listen to my last class, Sarah. I called on you so many times in last class. I was like, oh my God, Sarah, I'm sorry. I should give you a break. Like,
or gold star.
A gold star. Okay, Sarah gets, she gets status today. Okay, thank you. And then we were talking about the seltzers. Right, I know. Those are cold. Take a seltzer. Hold on. Those ones are cold, but they're not sugar-free, but they're really good. No, on those, yeah.
They're really good and they're lots.
Yeah, there's lots of it. Okay, there we go. Okay, now we can continue. Now we can go weiter. Okay, so we said it's your thought, speech, and action. We also divide the thought, speech, and action into the los ases and the 248 ases and the 365 los ases, and we said that there's two ways to connect to Hashem, through Ava and through Yira, and when you harness, when you do the mitzvos, the 248 Ramach, that's love. Like I want to give to Hashem. Like what can I do, right? Like Bikar Cholim and Hachnasas Archem and all those things are from the side of Ava. And then the Lo Sases of don't do, that's the side of Yira. That's really like boundaries. Like Hashem says, don't do this, don't kill, don't steal, don't do. All those don'ts are from that side of Yira. So this is just like bringing us back to everything that we said. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else. Oh yeah, so we ended off with saying that these clothing, right? The metaphor of clothing is that you put it on and then you can also take it off. So it's not necessarily always with you. We said the metaphor, don't ever think for 1 second that clothing is not as important as the neshama. This is like number one rule of Hasidus. Like anything that you think that was bad, it's actually not just good, it's probably the best. You know what I mean? Like it spins it on its head. It's like you think it's bad, no, it's not just not bad, it's not just good, it's like the best of the best. So with levushim, you could think like, oh, it's clothing, it's probably secondary to my soul. But the way that the Tanya describes it, and it's so beautiful, he basically says that what the clothing that I'm giving you, that Hashem gives you, is what lifts you up to higher places. So view the clothing as something that's maybe even higher than neshama. It's the plane, it's the platform. Hi, girls. Oh, Tammy's here. I didn't know that. So much fun. I'm so happy. It's like time to play dates. Yeah, I know. Now I feel like I'm in Orlando, like, you know. So don't for 1 second think that the clothing is secondary to your soul. If anything, that's what lifts you up. That's what takes you higher, and it gives you the ability to connect to Hashem even closer. So it really is a nice thing, and it's a beautiful thing. It's the nicest outfit. It's he refers to it as levushe hanefesh. Okay, so I want to just figure out where we ended off. I think I folded the page. Yeah. Okay, so we were almost finished chapter 4. And Okay, so this is like something, I don't know if this is like good, this is not, but this is definitely something that I'm like, I feel a lot since my father was nifter. Like I always think about the afterlife, and I'm like, can we like change the word to like not afterlife, but like different life? Because like the afterlife feels like that, like, you know, like you think like, okay, the movie ended. I don't know, sometimes you have this in the movie theater, like movies end for other people, but they start at the other times. Like the afterlife makes it like that we all have to be done, and then like then there's something else after. But really the afterlife, some people are living the afterlife while we're still living this life. So I don't want to call it afterlife. I'm like, call it different life. Like just right, different planes, right? Different planes, right? So like it's like it's something that I've been feeling and thinking about all the time, but when I hear it over here, like in Tanya, it makes you like just rethink everything about the afterlife. And that's actually what he calls this parak. And he says, V'lachein amru yafa sha'achas b'tshuva u'masim tovim ba'olam hazeh mikol chayi olam haba. So he says this concept of what we're going to be learning in Tanya now explains why the Mishnah teaches that it's better 1 hour of doing tshuva and masim tovim in this world than all the life of the world that is coming. So how do you interpret that? I know. Why does that bother you? Like, what? Something sounds different than what we've been learning our whole life. It's better 1 minute of tshuva in this world, doing Maisim Tovim, than it is all of everything in the afterworld.
Because we learned the reverse.
We learned the reverse, right? We learned it that like, oh my gosh, everything you do is for the next world. So it's a little bit of a paradox. You're like, how could you say it first when you first look at this? You're like, I don't understand. Like everything I thought that like in the next world, this is like how I was taught, like in the afterlife, that like everyone's gonna be sitting around like in a sukkah eating a lavyasan, because that was like my medrash report in Mrs. Tarshish, and like they're going to be like serving lavyasan, like, you know, like what meat are you serving? Like lavyasan. I'm like, I knew they were doing fish up there, like, you know, like they were so much healthier than like red meat, right? So they're doing lavyasan and they're sitting there nene mi ziv hashchina, like they're sitting there in the ziv hashchina, which, by the way, how do you interpret ziv hashchina? It's like more like the what? Like an aura, or like the light or the rays of it, right? So somebody here answered on Instagram, because you don't have another opportunity once you're out of this world. So which, yes, thank you, Dina.
That's why it's so
her name is.
important to do Maizen Tovim for people who have passed on.
Right.
Because you're lifting them up.
Right.
So.
They can't do, so let's say here we're like, okay, I want to do something good. So like I log in, right? I put on like my levushim and I do a mitzvah, right? But they don't have the ability to do that anymore. So that's one idea. And also the way that he explains it here is that based on this concept of everything we're learning, right? No, it's not connecting. Okay, ki olam haba hu nenim mizev hashchina, because in the world that's coming, we enjoy the radiance. Okay, that's how he interprets it, the radiance of the divine presence, which refers to the pleasure of understanding. Okay, so which is shehu tanav hahasaga. You know when someone's like, I have a hasaga, like, I don't know, like this person has a lot of hasagas. Like I never understood it. I have 4 brothers, and it was like so much yeshivish lingo that I was like, guys, like just speak in English, like, and stop calling me blob, like, you know, like blob stains. So hasagas, right? Like what does it mean? Like people who eat just, you know, like with the lettuce. There's a lot of hasagas, right? But really hasagas is understanding something. So the way that he explains what is Olam Haba, okay, so it's not like ceviche, it's not like a Suda fair and the thing, but what is Olam Haba? They're sitting around and they're nenamis of Shechina, they're enjoying and understanding Hashem, the Shechina. So now, first of all, we know that there's something very wrong with that, because we know that Hashem's will is so much bigger than anything, and Hashem's concept is so much bigger. Like, can we actually understand Hashem? Maybe in the next world, that's what you do, right? We don't understand Hashem. We don't know his ways. We do things that he says, but we don't fully understand it. So he says, I afshar l'shum nivra afilu me ha'alyonim lahasig ki im izahara me'ar Hashem. So he's saying, but one second, it's impossible for anybody, even people who are disembodied from their physical bodies, even people who are just neshamas, it's not possible for them to understand Hashem. So then what's really happening in Shemayim, and what's it different than the world down here, that we said that it's even better to be down here in this world doing tshuva than it is to be sitting up here, eating Levyasan, Ziv Hashchina, understanding Hashem. So there's like a little bit of a back and forth, but here what we understand, what the Baal Tanya answers with, is this idea, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's like a Zusha song that's with these words, but maybe not. Les machshava tfisa be. Like, I feel like,
Yeah, there is.
yeah, right? Like, it has, I'm like reading it, and I'm like, what's the tune? And then I'm like, oh, it's from the Zohar. So like, I don't know, like I'm just like quoting it like Zusha, but, so he says, Kadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo v'atzmo. So when you are in Shemayim and you're experiencing Ziv HaShechina, it's a ray of Hashem. I always think back to that example of like, Purim, when you were sitting over there and we're like saying the sun versus its rays. The sun is Hashem. We don't experience the sun. We experience like a little patch of the ray coming in. So in Shemayim, in the world to come, they don't really have any worries. They can't really do that much. But what they're doing is they're understanding the concepts of Hashem. But now we're saying that every single being, even if you are a total spiritual being, even if you're a malach, even if you're just a soul, even if you're like that, there's no way that you can understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu, less machshava tfisa be'klal, that no one can grasp Hashem at all. So we have to understand it. So the Baal Tanya is like bringing us to like this like big scary question, and then he answers it with one line, which we'll immediately understand because of everything that we learned with Tanya. He says, "Ki im kasher tfisa u'mispaleshes batorah mitzvasa," except nobody could grasp Hashem. Nobody, even big neshamas in Shemayim who've done nothing wrong, they can't fully grasp Hashem. But who can? And he says, except when you grasp Him and you're dressed in the Torah and mitzvos. So we've learned this before. We said that the way for us to fully connect to Hashem is through what? Is through Ma'asim Tovim, right? Is through making a dir b'tachtonim, is through doing actions. So you can't fully know Hashem here, but you can do mitzvos and Torah, and then when you do mitzvos and Torah, you access Hashem in this world in a way that's the deepest. It's probably like deeper, and literally what he's saying, deeper than what it is in Shemayim. Deeper when in Shemayim, it's like I have a ray of Hashem. I understand His will. But in this world, I can access Hashem and grasp Hashem. Because grasping is a weird thing. Like when you say you grasp something, you hold on to something, you are connected to that thing. The only way to be connected to it is through the Baal Tanya, what he says is through Torah and mitzvos. So
It's a way of being koneh something.
it's a way, I like that, a way of being koneh something, like you acquire something, right? When you are doing something, so really Hashem is not graspable. I think we ended off last week, we were talking about like Hashem is not graspable, Hashem is infinite. And in order for Him to create this world, He had to do what? Tzimtzum, right? You don't have to whisper, say loud. Right, Tzimtzum, Hashem had to constrict Himself. But the way that Hashem constricted Himself in this world is Hashem basically put Himself into this book. Hashem put Himself into Torah. Hashem took something that's finite, which is a Torah scroll, like literally, like Torah Shebachsav is finite, it's only 5 books, right? The 5 books of Moshe, that's Torah Shebachsav. But somehow Hashem was able to, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids Himself into the Torah. And now, when we do Torah, we are grasping Hashem. Understand? Like Hashem, like literally, like melted Himself into like a bunch of words and parchment paper, and now He's in that. And then when we've spoken about this, like remember, like later chapters, like the way for us to connect to Hashem, to grasp Hashem, like tfisa, that word of grasping, is by learning the Torah, is by being koneh. I like that, like being koneh the Torah. So when you do the mitzvahs and you do the Torah, that's what connects you to Hashem in the deepest way. Like if you think of a grasp, right? Like you hold on to something, right? Like little kids, it's like the cutest reflex. No, like when you're holding them and they like just like grab you and you're like, relax. Like you're literally like, you're not falling, you're not anywhere, right? You hold on to it. And by the way, the cool thing is that the way that the Torah works, and this is like cool, that it says cool. I don't know. I always keep saying the word cool. Like it's not like the way that the Baal Tanya explains it. He says, Av shehatorah nisbalsha b'dvarim tachtonim v'gashmiyim, that even when the Torah is like very mundane and like very boring and like an eye for an eye and an ox for an ox, and like, you know, like I listen to my boys like learning Gemara and I'm like, what are they learning? Like, this is so bizarre. And like, they're going over it, right? About an ox and the Shar and Reuven and Shimon and Levi came. And I'm like, what is happening here, right? Some of them are theoretical. Some of them maybe never even happen. But somehow Hashem finds Himself in these, like we find Hashem in here. So Hashem puts Himself in there. We learn it. And then it becomes not just a grasp, but it becomes a hug. And that's the mashal that the Baal Tanya gives. He says, "Kimechabik es hamelach derech mashal," that this can be compared to hugging a human king. She'ein hafarish b'memelas. Oh, so he says there's no difference whether you know a ton of Torah and you're learning Torah and you know a little Torah and you're learning Torah, because think about it with like the layers of clothing. So let's say like a king is wearing like, I don't know, a 3-piece suit. I don't know, whatever. They wear like a lot of, not suit, but like they wear like layers, right? Like they wear like one purple thing and then they wear a coat on top, right? If you're grasping the king on his coat and you're grasping the king on his shoe, it doesn't matter. You're hugging the same king. So if you learn Torah on the simplest level and you learn Torah on the deepest level. So like, I feel like sometimes we give our like the Sacrament of Education like a bad rep, but like we shouldn't. Like however you grasped Torah in 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade is the way that you is different. It's a different layer, it's a different grasp, and it's a different place of holding on to Hashem, but you can't discount that. So, like I was studying Dios Claudios with Bina. I don't know if you've been studying, Dios Claudios, 5th grade. It's like memorized like everything, right? Oh my gosh, yeah. So, like, of course, let's throw in, like, while I'm filling out all the rest of the camp applications, which I forgot to sign up for, like, let's study Dios Claudios. But anyway, I'm like sitting there with my 5th grade daughter and like studying with her, and like she has to memorize a lot of things, and I'm like, and then one of them was just like davening, and she was like singing Asher and she was singing Modani, and she was singing, and I'm like thinking like, oh, you don't have to sing this. Like, it's fine. Like, you know Modani, you know this. I don't want to skip it. And I was like, you know what? No, we're immersed in this right now. Like, I'm sitting on your bed. I'm super comfortable. I might fall asleep. Like, sometimes anybody fall asleep with their kids? Like, I'm always like repeat offender every single night. My kids, like, they walk away and I'm like sleeping in their bed. But I was like, even the simplest, even Moda'ani, I'm like learning this with her and studying this with her and memorizing like Bereshis, Noach, Lech Lecha, right? All the names of like everything. I'm like, Devarim, like I never got it. Kisavo, Kiseite, I always mix it up. But even those simple things, you're grasping Hashem, like you are connecting to Hashem at any level. It doesn't matter whether it's the simplest or it's the deepest Torah, you're connecting to Hashem. So even though we say that less machshava tfisa, like it's not possible for anybody to understand Hashem or to grasp Hashem because he's so big. You can grasp Hashem, except there's one exception when you immerse yourself in the Torah mitzvos. So you should never be so, you shouldn't be so focused on the afterlife. You should be focused on the now life and thinking, this is where I get to experience Hashem. In that sense, I get to experience Hashem. Like one of the mishalim that we've given like previously was that like it's like you're in Shemayim, you're like watching the Broadway show, you have like front row seats, but in this world you are the main actor in the Broadway show. So that's kind of where it is. So you're grasping Hashem, and even if Hashem is wearing many layers, the king himself is inside, and Hashem just dresses his will and his wisdom and everything into the Torah mitzvos, and it's like it's just a hug. It's a hug from Hashem. Okay. So that ends Parak Daled, and we'll get into Parak Hey. Now, any questions on that concept of like grasping Hashem? It like took me a minute to realize, but I was like thinking like a grasp is just like one hand, and like a hug is like two of them, and then when there's like two grasps, like it actually like forms it. Like it's
a hug is a whole body.
What? It's a whole body, right? It's not just like one thing. It's
not a fistful.
It's not just a fistful.
Wait, when does the hug happen?
The hug happens when we're immersed in learning Torah mitzvos, because that's where Hashem's will is. Shestal gave this thing like, he's like, he gave this example. He's like, anybody who thinks that the Gemara is about an ox, you're an ox. Like, you shouldn't think that it's about oxes. Like, an oxen on one level, on Pshat, it's about ox. But like on like drush and going even deeper and like sod, right? It's much deeper. We're not just learning about oxes just because it's a good example when we become farmers and Mashiach comes. Like, we're learning about it because there's real things to learn about it. And when you learn the pnimis of halacha, it really makes it beautiful.
Okay, are we never going to understand? Like, we're just going to connect, but we can't ever understand?
When Mashiach comes.
When Mashiach comes.
I'm saying now, like on
this world.
But they do understand it, right?
They grasp it, but not to the full extent. Not to the full extent.
Mashiach, this world during Mashiach is higher level than like in Kedusha, in understanding and everything. That's the angle.
Can I
Yeah.
have a mashal in my head?
I love a good mashal. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like raising children is probably a really good mashal because like we're always focused on like the end result, right? Like we want our kids to be like graduate, become like great people, get married, be successful, all those things. And when they're out of our house and we're older and we're getting like the pictures and the phone calls, like we're not in it, like we're able to appreciate the finished products, but it's not the same connection as like.
Oh my
those
gosh,
of us
that's an
that have,
amazing
like,
mashal.
babies, and we're like wiping.
Having
Right.
to be present with
Yeah, and like
Right.
it doesn't feel like
Nitty-gritty.
you're.
Oh my gosh.
connection.
I love that mashal. I love it. It's
It's a much.
like you
closer
have
connection.
nachas and you enjoy it and you know that it was right.
I always think of like Rav Chaim Kanievsky learning, like the pictures of him learning when he was like super old.
Yeah.
Right? Like that always like struck me as like it's never over. Like you're never like
Done learning.
like you're never
Right.
like oh I'm learned enough that I don't have to do this anymore or
Right.
you
It's
know,
like
I'm learned
forever
enough.
continuing
It's just,
education.
like, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
you're forever learning different things or learning different
Or learning the
interpretations
same thing.
or learning the same thing but
Right.
you're a different place in life.
Also, like
that.
Tati at the end, like my father at the end, like he went back literally just to be learning alphabets. My father was like the most learned person, but because of his like lack of vision or also lack of understanding at the end, I'm like he was learning alphabets, and I'm like his alphabets is just as powerful as all the mesechtas of like Gemara that he's learned and conquered. It really is. It's like it's the same. It's like you grasp it on one level, you grasp another level, you relearn it, and it all comes down to that. I know, like in Neve, whenever I used to bring any of my Olami girls back to Israel, we used to do trips. We bring them to Neve. Rabbi Marcus used to do a class on Aleph Beis. And I remember thinking, like, okay, like Aleph Beis is like really nice. Like maybe we should like teach them something like a little deeper. Like, you know, like I had this like idea, and then like you come in and like Rabbi Marcus spends like an entire year just learning Aleph. And then like Aleph is not just an Aleph. Aleph is 2 years and a Vav. And what's the gematria of Aleph? And what does Aleph mean? And I'm like, whoa, 1 second. Like here I am putting down like, no, we don't need to learn Aleph Beis, you know? And it was the deepest class. And all I learned about was Aleph. I got up to Beis, but like not 1 year, I'm sorry, 1 week. 1 week on each letter. Right. It's a lot of, right, I know. Okay, so we'll go on to Parak Hay. And in Parak Hay, he goes deeper. He says, Litosefes, Beor. So he wants to explain this word a little bit more, this word of tfisa. Let's clarify more in depth what this word grasp means. So he brings down from the Zohar, like Eliyahu Navi says, that no thought can grasp you. That's that les machshava tfisa base from the Zohar. He says that when you understand something, you own it, like you're kona it, and it becomes absorbed in you. And the Tanya suggests that the Zohar implies this terms of grasping is that when it becomes part of you. So if you remember back in the beginning of Tanya, we said there were 2 things that Hashem gave us. Hashem gave us soul clothing, and he also gave us food, right? I'm like, girl, you give me clothing, you give me food, I am like good, right? Like I have my kohos and I'm able, and I'm able to go. So what I'm giving you like a little bit like, who was it last time who said like I like to read the book, the ending of the book before? So the end of this parak is that basically what we're going to bring it down is to the difference between soul clothing and soul food. So this parak is going to be about soul food. So when you understand food, okay, so clothing we said you can put on and you could take off. It's the paper doll thing. What is food, how is food differ than clothing? You internalize it, you ingest it, right?
It gives you energy.
It gives you energy, it gives you chiyas, right? It becomes part of you. Integrated, much more integrated. Like I grew up watching Magic School Bus, like this was my thing. And the one, we talk about this, Miss Frizzle, I feel like I bring this up all the time. There's this one episode on the digestive system. And it you literally ingest food. You just watched it? Yeah? By the way, that's what happened in my old school. But really, like, when I had to, I feel like I said this last time. Yes, and the fighting and what breaks it down. You remember this episode?
Very clearly.
I literally was teaching my 11th grader like anatomy, and we were learning about the stomach and the small intestine and large intestine. I'm like, you gotta watch Miss Frizzle, and I put it on for her, and I went through. And she knew it, and she's like, the esophagus and the digestive tract and like the teeth, right? Food, you ingest it, and when it's correct food and when it's right food, all the right nutrients go to the right places and it becomes part of you and it gives you energy. So what we described in last week was ways that your soul can interact in this world, and the 3 interfaces we said was thought, speech, and action. And now in this parak, we're going to say that not only did Hashem give you clothing, but he also gave you food, and like really good food. He gave you soul food, and the answer of what this food is going to be Torah. And the idea, which I want to start off with, because sometimes I get a little lost in the text, is that the idea is that food is longer lasting. It becomes part of you. And when you know something, when you internalize and you know it, you can't unknow it. You know, like when people are like, don't tell me they use a light box. I don't know what you were saying, how you cleaned your lettuce. Because like once I know, then like I have to do it, right? Like, you know. Plus, you know, the better, right? Like, which is wrong because
Not
it's
true. That's not true. Because sometimes
if you didn't know.
you're more machmir and you're like
OCD.
you
Right.
no, that you don't know that like.
Oh, you don't know that there are leniencies,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Right.
Like, my mother-in-law used to not use a housekeeper on Shabbos growing up
Wow.
because she didn't know.
Oh my gosh, I used to have like students that came to my house that didn't flush the toilet on Shabbos. They were like, I wasn't sure if you were allowed to. I'm like, no, you can flush the toilet. But then I'm like, don't touch that. And they're like, hey, this is crazy. So sometimes like less you know maybe is the better. But the idea that once you know something, it becomes part of you. So Torah is higher than mitzvos in a sense because it becomes part of you in a way that you always know it. And by the way, even if you don't act upon it and just knowing it is already part of getting your soul lit up in this world, right? Remember we said you have a soul and you have 10 powers and you want to light up your soul in this world. You want to bring Hashem into this world through your soul powers, right? So how do you do it? You put on clothing, and now I'm telling you also you eat food, and that food is Torah, and that Torah will change you, and it'll bring so much light into this world. And Torah knowledge becomes part of you just like food becomes part of you, right? Like food, I always think about like during pregnancy I have gestational diabetes. Like I can't eat certain things because it'll affect my baby. So too and then I could eat certain things because it would. Food affects you on such a deep level. Torah also does. Torah knowledge will affect you on such a deep level that it's like a special bond that you have with Hashem, and we'll read it inside like what this bond is called. So we spoke about this concept of a bond a lot over Pesach. We were talking about yichud, right? Like the difference between shefa and yichud. Shefa is like Hashem just turn on the faucet. Yichud is like I'll meet you halfway. You turn on the water, and it's a connection. So what is this idea of learning Torah, and why is it so deep? Okay, so now that we did it like on the outside, I feel like we can go a little more inside. Sometimes I get lost in here, especially with all the Hebrew words. So he says that the idea of becoming fully grasped and engulfed and absorbed in your mind, that idea is the dimension of hasechal melubash b'mashal sha'ashamai. Sorry, I'll read it in English. That during the time that your mind is grasping Hashem and you master this idea, you kind of have this like aha moment. We spoke about this last time also. Have like, you know when like you're in the middle of a shir and you're like, oh, you have this like epiphany and you're like, oh, I get it. Like I understand. Like it happened to me like Rabbi Yossi was talking about something before Pesach and he was like, you take out 3 matzahs and that's the masculine energy, and you take out the 4 cups of wine and you put the 4 cups of wine around the matzahs, and I'm like, 3 mothers and 4 fathers, right? Like I was like masculine, feminine. Like all of a sudden you have this moment. When that moment happens, you feel you become absorbed, and also not only absorbed, but like you become captivated by the Torah. You become like intrigued by it. It becomes part of you, and at that point that's when you know that you grasped it. You said Hashem. You can't grasp Hashem. Nobody could grasp Hashem.
But then try repeating it later, and then it's
No, it makes no sense. But you heard it and you felt it. Yankee was like that. Like after Pesach, he like came over and he's like, "Okay, let me tell you all of Rabbi Yossi's Torah, like right now, one foot." And he's like,
never mind.
He's like, it was really good. And when there's not so many people there, he's a little bit more candid. I'm like, okay, so what did he say? He's like, somebody said, he's like, it was really good. Like, it doesn't matter. He had that moment of grasping it and being connected to the will of Hashem. And that's where, even though you can't grasp Hashem, you can grasp him, and he will grasp you when you connect to Torah. And he says that the mashal that he gives here of being like engulfed in it, he says it's a, hold on one second. Oh, he gives an example of, let's say, like learning halachos. And like Reuven did this, and Shimon did this, and then Levi did this. But if this is how it falls out, what does Tosfos say about it? And then they answer, let's say what one person says and what one rabbi says and what one rabbi says. And when they do that, listening to the battle of Gemara basically is Hashem's will and thought and knowledge and interest in everything in this world. So just listening to that, just connecting to it on some level is you're like, wait, I know Hashem lives here. Remember we said this, like Hashem only lives in the Dalet Amos of halacha, right? Hashem's will, Hashem's ratzon is in that. The fact that Hashem actually thought about like Reuven's ox eating like the grass of Shimon, like Hashem thought about that, right? Like there was a thought process that Hashem thought about before this Gemara happened. So it's like, what's really happening here? That means Hashem thought. and you're in Hashem's thoughts, and you're in Hashem's will, and you're raising the kids. I love that, Masha. Like you're in it, like for real. And that engulfment, that feeling of connected to Hashem, he refers to it as, I want to find it inside. Okay, so here he says, what is this? When your mind becomes absorbed in them, it says, V'hu yichud nifla. It's a yichud, which is a connection to Hashem, which is nifla, which is like, nifla. It says like wondrous, phenomenal merging experience of two beings. And there's no other merging experience like this. Nothing remotely comparable exists in the physical world where you become so enmeshed with Hashem that it's indistinguishable that it's two beings. That when you are learning Torah, you are connecting to Hashem in the deepest way that it looks like it's just one person. It's a yichud. That's what yichud is, right? Like yichud is oneness. So physically, it's not possible for us to like merge with another person. Like, you know, like I remember when we were kids, it used to be like double exposures. Like, do you ever have that when you used to like print out your pictures? And it was, you know what I'm talking about? No. My kids, they saw this during Shiva by my parents. Like we had like old photo albums and they're like, how come there's a person also here on this page? Like, and I'm like, it's a double exposure. And they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's like when the film goes through and you by mistake took two pictures on one. So that's the only way that's like a mashal I think of, like two people become one. Like you're merged into it. Do you know what I'm talking about? Which album it's in? It's in that red one. I have to get it. It was a very funny conversation. Like I said it, Bina was like, what are you talking about?
Well, also kind of like a wick of a Havdalah candle, which is kind of like the purpose. It's like.
Oh, is that the purpose?
I don't know. I just made it up.
Torah by Paloma. Sounds good. Yeah.
It
has to be 2 weeks and it becomes one, right?
Probably is.
Right. It probably is. Two souls joining one, right? So this merging, this incredible experience is what happens when we are connected to Hashem. And when we are learning Hashem's Torah. Okay. Now, hold on one second. Talks about like speech. Hold on one second.
While you're looking, I also remind me when we discussed that the Rav was saying Likutim Moran, men when they learn at night, it's that extra because it's coming out of like a real effort, not something that they're bound to because they
right. Yeah, that learning at night is like an extra connection. It's like extra credit. It's like something a little bit more. You all get extra credit. Thursday night, you all get extra credit. Okay, I'm just like looking at the time.
But this is also consistent with everything we've been learning because it's saying that it's the food, it's on a higher level, it becomes a part of you, and it's the cognitive, it's learning, right? And the mitzvahs are emotional, it comes from love and fear, it's emotional, it's
right. Is on a higher level, right? And it's a higher connection. It's a higher connection because, by the way, within Torah, by the way, is also mitzvos. So Torah is the highest, and this is why we say Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. I always think about that, like when I'm davening, because that's what I get to most in davening is brachos, right? Like Il Dvarim, right? And I list all these things like Kibbut of Aim, Levayis Hamei, Speaker Cholim, right? And Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Like visiting your grandmother and doing tzedakah and making people happy at weddings, like all of that in Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. I never really fully understood that. But now you know that Torah is the highest, right? Soul food. But within Torah, is contained within it all the mitzvahs. So it is. So the thing is, though, it's a drop paradoxical, and I'm like trying to work this through, and Mary, bear with me, because I feel like you'll have this answer, because not everything is going to click into every single mashal. Like the fact that we always say that...
Always in Chassidus, it's like that.
Right, like here it makes so much sense that Torah is higher, but in a few chapters later we say that action's the highest. So it works in this mashal, but not necessarily, right?
Like the word tzaddik could be one thing.
Versus tzaddik
in other works of
Shivim Param Torah. That's what you just say, right?
It's not linear.
It's not linear. Okay, so then it says that the mitzvahs performed during a person's life, when the way that he describes this scene, this is actually... he says this is according to the Eitz Chaim, this is from Kabbalah, that the way that we describe Gan Eden, now we have such a clear view of Gan Eden, is that the mitzvos that you perform in this world becomes your clothing in the next world. And the Torah that you conquer in this world and ingest in this world becomes the Torah that you learn in the next world. Okay, so your energy that you get from mitzvos provides you the clothing. Your energy you get from Torah provides you your food, right? Like that, okay? So that's how it says in the Zohar. So when it says that when you learn Torah Lishma, like we always say, what's Torah Lishma? Like, we don't have a test. There's no homework here. No one's giving you assignments. I mean, sometimes we give out gold stars. But the idea of learning Lishma, what does it mean to learn to Lishma? Learn Lishma means to attach yourself to Hashem just to have that yichud nifla, just to be able, just to be able to connect to Hashem. So sometimes
that's
like
the ultimate Torah for the schar for Olam Haba is not the point.
Right. Like we're always taught, like the Torah that you learn is for the credits and the points that you cash in the next world. But here, the way the Baal Tanya is explaining it is that when you decide to learn Lishma and just take on learning, like, hi, all of us in Tanya here, like, no credits, no charge, no cost, no commitment, you come when you come, that's Lishma. That means, like, I want to connect to Hashem. So a lot of times when we want to connect to Hashem, we're like, oh, I need to say Tehillim, I need a tefillah, I need a daven, right? You could also just like crack open up a Tanya and be like, okay, let me chazer, let me review, let me learn. Or I do Nachyomi and I started now doing it in the text inside just so I could see the words. I'm like, no one's testing me on Nachyomi. No one's asking me what happened and how many years David HaMelech like fought in this battle and how many people, nothing. But when I see it inside, you're kona in it, you would ingest it, it becomes part of you and you're like, one second, even though David HaMelech lived a long time ago, sounds like similar to the stories that are happening now, right? Like my life becomes part of that, and that is being able to learn Lishma. And I feel like as mommies, like anybody who's learning now at this point, like this is Lishma. This is to be able to connect to Hashem, and you should feel it. You should walk away with a feeling of like, I just hugged Hashem. I just had this yichud nifla, like this incredible connection to Him. So the soul's food refers to the ability to internalize Hashem, and that's going to be, and then the garments refer to the, like into the next world, all the mitzvos that we did are going to give us our clothing. So the more mitzvos you do, the more beautiful your clothing is there. Like you want Zimmerman, you want nice things, like you do your mitzvos here, right? Even though it's like lo amanas, the kabel press, like it shouldn't be like that. Okay, and therefore, this is why we say Talmud Torah keneged kulam. That lefisha ha-mitzvos hein levushim levad, so the mitzvos are levushim, but the Torah, he hamazon, he's the food, v'gam lavash. It's food and also clothing. So it is a little bit higher. Okay, so he says, like, really, basically, by us studying the Torah and by us performing the mitzvos, your soul is really becoming equipped and getting better at shining its light and bringing more light to this world. Okay, I'll end here. Okay, 4 to 6 minutes. You take it. Okay, thank you all for joining. Someone just asked.